Hi, I'm Morgan Johnson with Democratic Voices, and today we have a really special feature for you guys. Thanks for everyone for tuning in and for submitting your questions in advance. Let me introduce to you our guest, Chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party, David Pepper.
Thank you.
Hello, David. And as you can see from my stack of note cards, there were a lot of questions submitted, so we're going to try to roll through these and get through them in a moment. And if at any point you, during the live broadcast, have a question maybe for Chairman Pepper, you could use a hashtag DemVoices Q&A. DemVoices QA, rather, there is no and. And we're going to try to take a break or two during this. And after those breaks, hopefully we can get to the questions. So we've got a ton to get through. Let's get the ball rolling.
Great. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's really great to have you here. So to get started, this was the top voted question by our Facebook audience. We posed a couple of things. What are people interested in hearing? And their number one question was, how does the Ohio Democratic Party plan to reach out to rural voters who don't feel their voices are always included in the Ohio Democratic Party?
Thank you. That's a great question. And one of the things that we've done a whole post-mortem on what happened in the fall. And one of the biggest flaws by the coordinated campaign was they really almost didn't speak to rural Ohio. They didn't make a case for why folks in the smaller red counties should consider voting for Hillary Clinton. And you go back into 8 and 12, and Barack Obama, he didn't win in those counties, but he did pretty well because he went and made his case. And I think if you listen to President Obama in the last couple of months, he has said you need to go talk to people. And so when we look back, and the reason this question is so important is if you look at the results of 2016, the numbers in rural Ohio collapsed. The smallest 50 counties, President Obama lost, but he lost 60-40. He lost in the smallest 50 counties by about 180,000 or so votes. Hillary Clinton lost those same counties 72-28, almost 400,000. And so that was one of the biggest areas where we saw a huge drop-off. So I think the number one answer is go out and talk to people. And the ultimate execution on the coordinate campaign didn't really have people going to the doors and knocking on doors or sending mailers that spoke directly to the issues of smaller towns, of red counties. And I think the lesson is if you don't talk to people, you may not have won anyway, but you at least will get to 60-40 like Obama did. If you don't talk to people, the bottom falls out. And so what are we doing about that? First, we've already started this just the other day. We are doing what we call kitchen table conversations as a party all over Ohio. Blue areas, red areas. And these are not sort of rah-rah Democratic meetings. We're having those too, by the way. These are listening sessions. Let's go to parts of the state that didn't feel that Democrats were listening to them, that feel like Democrats are in a bubble, and that feel like we aren't talking about their issues. And let's make sure before we start running in 18, and we got a lot of good candidates already starting, that before we run, before we put together our platforms, that we have gone out in large city, small town, and really listen to people about the issues that they face and really about the state of their community. What's the state of jobs in rural Ohio? What's happened in the last 20 years? What's the state of the schools? We have this heroin epidemic we literally lead the nation. Let's really listen and show, first of all, by listening that we're not in the bubble, that I think people in many ways accurately said that our candidates might have been in just a year ago. And secondly, from all that input, let's use it to shape our platforms and our candidates' messaging in 18. So we're gonna have, I hope, at least 40 of these kitchen table conversations of just pure listening. We had one in Medina County the other day. We heard about the need for steps to keep young people in the county. We heard about how much they love their parks. We heard about how much they're worried the environment, some of the things that are happening statewide are going to undermine their environment, their clean air, their clean water. It was a really good session, and we're going to do these all over the state to make up for the problem last fall, which is that people really didn't perceive that, especially the presidential campaign, was really even talking to, let alone listening to, the concerns of rural Ohio.
Perfect. So it sounds like this could be one of those conversations.
Absolutely.
Good way to reach out to folks. So let's get to our next question. This is from someone in Youngstown. Asked, why do you think Ohioans who maybe supported Donald Trump, which was the majority of voting Ohioans, chose to support him? Like, what would you think would be the psychology? Maybe you're getting some of these answers
Yeah.
in these conversations you're having. What might have been the reasoning behind that?
So that's a great question, and I think that even more precisely, I think the question we should ask ourselves is, especially the voters that voted for Obama in
Right.
12,
Right.
and then voted for Trump in
Flipped for
16.
Trump.
That's the ones we really have to understand. So I don't want to get into too much categorization. Some people may have voted for Trump because they loved everything he ever said.
Yeah,
We're probably never going to win those people over.
that's true.
Some people, everything he said was automatically disqualifying. I would say I'm one of those people. When he said what he said about women or the Khan family, I thought to myself, like maybe you did, I don't care what else he says, I could never vote for that person.
Right.
Then there were a lot of people who I think probably didn't like some of that stuff, but unlike you and me, it wasn't disqualifying. And those are some of the people that I don't think we ever talked to enough. We assumed that it was disqualifying that he said the horrible things he said about women or cities and all the stuff he talked about with inner cities and horrible stuff. But for some people, they may not have liked it, but it wasn't disqualifying, and they may have still voted for him because he did talk to them on some economic issues,
Right.
and
that
he
were
hit them at their
yeah.
frustration. So the way I think about it is this way, and I think the question shows from Youngstown. There are a lot of people in this state and in other states who have been sitting in a community that has lost a lot of jobs, lost manufacturing. They have felt it. Their families have felt it. Their neighbors have felt it. They see it everywhere, and it's really frustrating. And the world has changed dramatically from, say, 20 or 30 years ago. In Youngstown area and others, that's a lot of what folks have experienced. And if all the really bad stuff he was saying didn't disqualify him, and you were looking for someone to speak to that concern,
Yeah.
and he was saying, I'm going to tear up TPP and I'm going to tear up NAFTA, and our candidate never said that, he actually might have spoken to you more clearly than the Democrat did. And I think those are the voters that we long-term cannot afford to lose. And we have to be much clearer that no. For the last 30 or 40 years, it's been candidates like Sherrod Brown that have been more outspoken on some of those negative things than Donald Trump ever was. I mean, after all, he's still making those hats in China.
Right.
He never spoke out against any of this stuff until he started running. But somehow we lost that message. And so for some people who maybe weren't totally, they were offended by some of what he said, but not so much that it was disqualifying. On that economic message, for them, for some, it wouldn't have probably been even a close call, because here was someone who was speaking to that frustration, and I don't think at the top of the ticket we were quite as clearly. So
Quite.
I think we lost a lot of people on the economics, and I think we can gain them back on the economics when first a lot of, Donald Trump, since he became president, he hasn't been putting people in place that have fought for working families their whole lives. He seems like he's hired half of Goldman Sachs
Yeah.
to be in the cabinet.
Yeah.
So I think he's not going to fulfill all these promises. And I think and we'll have Sherrod Brown and people like him who have fought this battle for decades. Who knows who else? But we have a lot of great candidates, a lot of great office holders, and we have to win back those voters on those issues.
Very good. So thinking about maybe not so much the people who did support Trump, we got a lot of questions from people who ultimately didn't, and their
Right.
generation ultimately doesn't,
Right.
and that's young people like myself.
Right.
So we have an anonymous submission, and the question is, why do you think fewer young people identify with either of the political parties?
Right.
There's like a statistical trend now towards, independence or maybe even third party,
Yeah.
for youth, which is interesting. So why do we think that on both sides there's like a partisan identification
Right.
drop off?
I think your questioner and you would know as much as I would on this, and I'd be interested in hearing feedback. But I think either way, parties are kind of institutional, and they, in and of themselves, they almost automatically are sort of an established institution. And I think young people maybe just aren't, that's not what they're into. That's sort of, almost in and of itself corporate in a way that young people might not want to associate. But I look back to my own identity in college. I wasn't part of the official, I was a progressive in my mindset, but I also wasn't joining the college Democrat organization of my college.
Right.
And so I think what we have to do is not, when we start organizing on campuses, for example, or
Yeah.
even with young people, our goal should not be to have them join. If they join the Ohio College Democratic Club of their college, great. But we should organize them. We shouldn't force people into a box they don't want to be in. What we should do is do it through the issues.
Yeah.
Do it through, there will be many people, let's say, on a college campus that are much more interested in the Ohio State Women's Caucus doesn't have the name Democrat next to it than being in the Democratic Club. That's great. So I think as a party, what we should do is, knowing that young people don't want to just be in a box of a partisan identity, but I think most are actually, when you start talking about social issues, economic issues, I think most are still progressive.
They're
that if
very
we're smart enough to address and engage through those issues and through those concerns, even without that partisan identification, we can still show we're the ones fighting for millennials and young people on the issues they care about. And we're the ones far more consistent with the values that they cherish than
the
Donald
other
Trump
side,
or
yeah.
Mike Pence or others. So I think that the lesson is, it's okay if people don't have to have a party identity.
Mm-hmm.
We have to address them through the things that they think most about, which are issues and the groups that they associate with.
That's very good. I mean, I definitely agree. I'm a young person, clearly, and so many people, you wonder, like, maybe you do identify with something and maybe you don't, but they really do care about the issues. And
Right.
I think it's been nice to see like a wave of vocalization
Right.
around particular interests.
Right.
So our next question comes from Terry in Union County, and her question is, 90% of our local offices run unopposed by Republicans. How can we field viable candidates in this environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I was in Union County last night, and it was good to be there. And Union County is the kind of county where it's very conservative, and so there probably are a lot of offices left unchallenged. And first of all, I figured out early on that half of this job, and half of the job of any good county chair, is recruiting, finding good people to run for office. And one of the problems that our party has, and I think it's one reason we are where we are nationally, is that this party has been too focused on the presidential races and a few national races, and we have not done enough to say, hey, all levels of public service matter. Running in a tough race, even if you don't win, that also is a form of public service because you're giving people a choice. And so there are no off-year elections. That term itself is a terrible suggestion that if it's
Right.
not a presidential year, it doesn't matter. So our goal is to really always be recruiting and training people to be public servants. And in the end, when people ask me what I do as chair, I'd say the most important role I play is I'm in the public service leadership development business. We need to find good people running all the time, and we need to run in places where it's probably easier to win, but we also need to give people in Union County a choice as much as we can. The hard part is asking people to give up half their life to run in a gerrymandered district or in a very Republican area. You're asking a lot. And so I think we have to do on our end a lot more training and a lot more support to local candidates running in local races and say to them, yes, this is an uphill battle, but by running itself, you are doing a great service. You're helping carry the party's message. You're helping give voters a choice. And sometimes, depending on crazy years, you may end up winning. And we need to encourage that. But on our end, we have to provide enough support. And by support, I don't mean just writing checks. I mean training. How do you use the voter file? How do you fundraise well? What is a strong message? We have to provide enough support to make it worthwhile people taking a risk to run. And right now, we're doing very well. We had some great wins in 15 and 16. All of this, by the way, we call it our Main Street program. And if you're interested in running in Union County or in Cincinnati or anywhere between, on February 18th, we actually have our Main Street training. And if you're interested in doing that, go to our website, ohiodems.org. Let us know, because if you're interested in running this year or down the road, we want to know who you are. We want to help you think about that race. And again, we don't like this number that there are a lot of offices that are unchallenged, and we want to help encourage people to do that.
I think it sounds like there are a lot of valuable resources there, and that was something that we were definitely asked about when we were fielding questions. A lot of people wanted to know, you know, under this wave, I know for like people in the primary who were Sanders supporters, they had this big thing, you need to go run for your local races. Is the party like building an infrastructure to kind of open up the floodgates for new candidates to come in who maybe weren't, you know, part of the traditional structure, or maybe they're young and they don't always identify as clearly?
Yeah, so I became chair in January of 15, and the first thing I announced, with Nina Turner, by the way, was our Main Street Initiative, which was, we want people to run for office at all levels, and we don't want people to feel like there's some sort of special line they have to have already been in to run. And so this training I mentioned on February 18th, if you are interested in running this year, or if you think I might want to run down the road, but I want to know what I should do to prepare for that, we want you at this training. You don't need to give us some resume about all your involvement. If you're in a community you want to run, we want to help you get there. And we started this 2 years ago, and you know, here's some examples. We had an 18-year-old win a village council seat in 15, a young woman. We won the first seat in years, and there's only now one Democrat on the Wilmington City Council. There's a 26-year-old woman who was one of our candidates that we helped train, and she was the top vote getter in Wilmington, Ohio, a very conservative place. To the question, you know, this is a place that often Democrats weren't competing in. So our entire goal is to get people in a pipeline, show them how to run a good campaign. You know, sometimes people make mistakes in the campaign because they've never run before. They end up wasting money on some bad. Our goal is to help prevent those mistakes. So, yeah, we are passionate, maybe more than anything else we do. Now, in the presidential year, we're asked to play a role with the national stuff. But if you told me year in and year out what's the most important thing we do, it's actually trying to help people get elected at all levels. And we'll just keep doing that. And we love when new people show up to help us. We love when they show up and we can help them win. That's great.
Well, what we're going to do for now is we're going to take a really quick break, but please remember to use the hashtag DemVoicesQA if you have questions, and hopefully we can answer it after the end of the break.
Thanks. Great.
I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. Hey, yo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. I'ma get a scholarship to King's College. I probably shouldn't brag, but dag, I'm amazed and astonished. The problem is I got a lot of brains but no polish. I gotta holler just to be heard. With every word I drop knowledge. I'm a diamond in the rough, a shining piece of coal, trying to reach my goal. My power of speech unimpeachable. Only 19, but my mind is older. These New York City streets get colder. I shoulder every burden, every disadvantage I've learned to manage. I don't have a gun to brandish. I walk these streets famished. The plan is to fan this spark into a flame. But damn, it's getting dark, so let me spell out the name. I am the A-L-E-X-A-N-D-E-R. We are meant to be a colony that runs independently. Meanwhile, Britain keeps shitting on us endlessly. Essentially, they tax us relentlessly. Then King George turns around, runs a spending spree. He ain't never gonna set his descendants free. So there will be a revolution in this century. Enter me,
he says in parentheses.
Don't be shocked when your history book mentions me. I will lay down my life if it sets us free. Eventually, you'll see my ascendancy. And I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. Hey, yo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. Hey, yo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. It's time to take a shot.
I dream of life without a monarchy. The unrest in France will lead to anarchy. Anarchy, how you say? Or anarchy. When I fight, I make the other side panicky with my shot.
Yo, I'm a tailor's apprentice, and I got child knuckleheads and local parentes. I'm joining a rebellion, cause I know it's my chance to socially advance. Instead of sewing some pants, I'm gonna take a shot.
And but we'll never be truly free until those in bondage have the same rights as you and me. You and I do or die. Wait till I sally in on a stallion with the first black battalion. Have another shot.
Geniuses, lower your voices. You keep out of trouble and you double your choices. I'm with you, but the situation is fraught. You've got to be carefully taught. If you talk, you're gonna get shot.
Bird, check what we got. Mr. Lafayette, hard rock like Lancelot. I think your pants look hot. Lawrence, I like you a lot. Let's hatch a plot blacker than the kettle calling the pot. What are the odds of God will put us all in one spot? Pumping a squad in conventional wisdom, like it or not. A bunch of revolutionary manumission abolitionists. Give me a position, show me where the ammunition is. Oh, am I talking too loud? Sometimes I get overexcited, shoot off at the mouth. I never had a group of friends before. I promise that I'll make y'all proud.
Let's get this guy in front of a crowd.
I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. Hey, yo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. Hey, yo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot.
Everybody sing.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Hey.
Whoa.
Say, let 'em hear you. Let's go. I said, shout it to the rooftop. Sit to the rooftop. Come on. Come on, let's go. Rise up when you're living on your knees. You rise up. Tell your brother that he's gotta rise up. Tell your sister that she's gotta rise up.
Okay, so we're back. We're going to start with a live submitted question. I believe this is from Facebook. So Liam from Youngstown, we got a lot of Youngstown in the house today, has a question about mental health and mental health care. Liam says, I will soon be off of my parents' health care, which I use to subsidize necessary mental health care. Neither party at the federal level demonstrates a strong commitment to mental health, and they seem to express that they might seem to express in speeches. So maybe he's saying there's no policy help there. Will Dems in Ohio realistically be able to put up a fight for the mentally ill if our worst fears are realized under Donald Trump?
That's a great question, and let me just say, I was a county commissioner in Hamilton County, and the counties are the front line of a lot of social services like mental health, and so I did deal with that issue a lot and did a lot of work. We created a mental health docket to deal in our criminal justice system. We have a levy down there that's very supportive. To the question though, I mean, I don't, and by the way, I think that we all know we're not nearly where we need to be as a country, as a state, when it comes to taking mental health as seriously, providing as much treatment as we need to, including in the criminal justice system, but way beyond that.
Yes.
But let me just answer it by saying, realistically, the answer is no. I mean, we are, and this is why 18 is so important. We are outnumbered in Ohio. We are in the minority in the State House. And we need to all raise as much noise as we can, like that amazing march the other day, and stand up every single time they try and do something terrible, whether it's getting rid of the Affordable Care Act or all the other things they're announcing every day. I think the power and voice of the people sometimes will be enough to stop some things. Like you all saw this ethics. They tried to, 2 weeks ago, get rid of the independent ethics body of the Congress. They were so jammed up by phone calls, they actually dropped it.
Right.
Now, the good news is a lot of these congressmen, the Republicans, they have never really faced an angry public because for the last 8 years, Obama would veto anything crazy they were doing. So they would vote against the Affordable Care Act 50 times, but no one really said much because he wouldn't let it happen. Now their votes really matter.
Yeah.
So whether it's mental health or whatever the other issue, and this is why it's so encouraging to see what we're seeing, but also I'll talk about some of what we're building for this. The Democrats, the formal Democratic electeds, are outnumbered in a way that if Donald Trump or John Kasich wants to do something terrible about mental health, it's very hard to stop themselves. But I think if we are able to take all the energy and, frankly, the frustration and the fear and the disgust that we are seeing right now that was reflected in Washington and channel it into advocacy that's sort of in your face, online, outside of a congressional office, jamming at the phone lines, I think that maybe we can stop some of these things, but it's going to have to be way more than just outnumbered Democratic officials. It's going to have to be, frankly, the reverse of what the Tea Party was. And progressives who care about issues like mental health, other big issues, women's health, choice, it's going to have to be just incredibly loud, incredibly strong. And I think either we stop really bad things through that, or we make it so clear and so painful that in 2 years, when these people are up for re-election, we actually, for the first time in a long time, have a chance to hold them accountable.
It seems like the sentiment right now is that politics is no longer a spectator sport.
Right.
Like it's something where it's all hands on deck
Yeah.
if you care about particular issues like this. So
Yeah, and
I
we're,
think-
by the way, we're seeing that. We
Yeah.
have had meetings around the state in December, and we saw crowds that would have been 100 6 months ago be 300 or 400. Half those people I'd asked them, have you ever been to a Democratic meeting before? No, I haven't. I'm so upset. I want to be here. So we are seeing that, and our goal right now is to sign every one of those people up. And a lot of them are mainly signing up because they want to speak out on issues like mental health and others. And so we are creating mechanisms. We call it our Truth Team, where in every congressional district, we are asking people to be part of an advocacy team that can challenge these Congress people, these State House people, in a way that they've never been challenged before.
Very good. So we have another question. Kamani from Columbus asks, as a 16-year-old, I am wondering how you will plan to engage young voters like myself in 2018.
Okay, a couple good ideas on that. First, in all those meetings I just described that we had around the state, we've actually had a number of high school students come. There was a woman last night in Union County who was in high school, and I can tell you that's new. I mean, I have not seen as many high school Democrats involved, and they are part of this new energetic group.
Right.
So one thing is to try and organize high school Democrats, and our party right now is working with high school Democrats who have shown up at different events to start. There's a National High School Democrat growing organization, and we want to do the same thing here. So that's one thing. But you know, the other idea that I'm excited about, and hopefully he and others will think this is a good idea. I think the best people to convince young people, this goes back to your other question too, to convince young people why this matters are their peers.
Other young people.
So we want to do some type of scholarship award and crowdsource. That's the technical language for saying, let's have a competition.
Yeah.
And I want to ask young people to make videos or use whatever current social media they know how to use best, you know, a shareable Facebook, the kind of things that Democratic Voices does, a shareable Facebook graphic, something that is a young person trying to show his or her peers, you know, why it matters to get involved, why it matters to get involved in 18, and to open that up and see how many get in. And my guess is that their message will be far better than anything we could say to convince their peers to get involved. So we'll be announcing that down the road. Okay. But I'm very excited to actually ask the young people who are involved, who know why they're involved, they'll be the best messengers as to why all this matters, as to why getting involved matters, why these elections that are coming up matter. And so we want to ask them to weigh in, and I think they'll do a better job than those of us, you know, who are a little older will ever in communicating. And they'll do it through different social media mechanisms that the rest of us are still trying to figure out.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to do that.
We're all about new engagement, so I think that's really exciting. Very cool prospect. Another Columbus question is, most people don't know that Ohio now has online voter registration. What are your long-term plans for ensuring people know and exercise their right? And also, maybe, why don't we know?
Yeah. Well, so this it is a big development, and I want to give credit where credit is due. Democrats pushed for this years ago, and the Republicans wouldn't do it. We wanted online voter registration. I think there was a bill in 2009. They wouldn't do it. People like Kathleen Clyde and others have been pushing for this for years. Finally, middle of last year, the Republicans said, we're going to do it, but it wasn't perfect because they said, but we won't do it for 2016. You know, how convenient was that for them? So they wouldn't do it in 16, and they also required a voter ID with it, which limits, you know, for certain people, seniors, others. All of a sudden, there's certain people who aren't going to be able to do it. So it wasn't perfect, but yes, it is a step forward. So to answer your question, one, we just need to all, in the way we organize, take advantage of what does now exist and what we can do. And that will make, you know, our voter registration efforts, I think, far more robust. So we have to spread the word. But the second thing we can do is not stop advocating for something better. And a lot of states are now going to automatic online registration, where you then default out and you have to opt out. I'm sorry. And we should keep pushing for that kind of thing because it's being done in other places, so their registration is much, much higher. Ultimately, the voting numbers are a lot higher. And so I think we need to do our best to spread the word that it exists. In organizing, we will do that. But I also think from a policy standpoint, we shouldn't just accept what the Republicans gave us after 5 years of obstruction as sort of the perfect answer. Actually, we can do a lot more, and we can do what other states have done, which is automatic registration, which is something that's working in other places to get a lot more people registered. And by the way, I can't talk about registration without also talking about, on the flip side, the horrible things that were done last year in terms of purging.
The voter purges.
Purging hundreds of thousands of people, and I'm really proud that the ACLU and a couple other groups, the A. Philip Randolph Institute, took John Husted to court and showed that he was illegally purging people. He violated federal law, and we joined that suit later, and we spent a lot of time trying to re-register those people. But there were people in last November's election that were purged, and I don't think it changed the outcome in Ohio, but it was a horrible thing that's happened for years, and we still have a lot of work to do to get to the bottom of just who was purged and making sure we get them back on the rolls.
We followed that really closely, and our Dem Voices watchers know we did a voter purge rap and an animated video. Maybe we need to do a voter reg rap also.
Absolutely.
To keep it going. So we'll do another Columbus question. Comes from Sarah. Sarah says there appears to be significant debate within the party's national leadership as to whether the DNC can function without corporate donations. So what would we do? Would you possibly want to support a return to Obama rules in 2008, which sought to limit corporate influence and lobbyist influence on party membership?
Yeah, that is a debate I've been watching, and we hosted a lot of these forums for the DNC
chairs,
leadership, and it's frankly it's been great they've all come through here. I'd say my number one answer is I think this is a good conversation for the DNC members to have, and there are 400 plus of them, and we're watching. Some have said they would not have any of that. Others have said, and the argument on the other side is, I think, and by the way, before we get to that, let's be clear, as a matter of broader democracy, we're the ones who are fighting to get rid of Citizens United. We're the ones, as a matter of overall policy, saying, we saw it here in Ohio. The result of Citizens United in corporations buying elections are horrible, not just for Democrats, but for states like Ohio, where Rob Portman basically, his campaign was an afterthought to the Koch brothers campaign. The Koch brothers are the ones who spent tens of millions in corporate money to win that seat. And so first things first, this party has to stand up and try and correct that short and long term. And I think that and gerrymandering are the two worst things in politics right now, really hurting our system. As for what the party does, I do think that it's a conversation that DNC will have. I understand the concern. I also will say that at the same time, when the other side is loading up every dollar they can, that if we make decisions that sort of tie our own hands behind our back, we make it very hard to compete. And I think that's sort of the debate that the DNC will play out. And I'll be interested as to how the different DNC candidates ultimately resolve that. And I think it'll end up being a conversation in the broader Democratic family. And I think there frankly are strong arguments on all sides of that.
I think another solution that kind of came of maybe the Sanders wave is we don't need a super PAC,
Right.
like the crowdfunding thing. So is that something that you guys are considering too, as maybe an alternative to big bundled funding? Maybe do it through grassroots donors.
So trust me, if everyone could do what Bernie Sanders did, we'd all do it in a second. And it was amazing what he did. From the beginning as chair, I have worked very hard to make sure that we actually raise money, small dollar money. So we have created all sorts of small dollar contributions. We have something we call our 1618 Club. Our overall strategic plan is called our 1618 plan, 18 being the end goal of winning all these state races in 18. Our 1618 Club are people who give $16.18 a month, and they have a pin. And they wear it. It's a 1618, and by being in there, there are events that they get invited to and all sorts of other things. So we are trying, and in the end, just like Bernie Sanders did, if we can get thousands of people to give $16 a month or $5 a month or $2 a month, that ends up paying for a ton of things. And so every single day, we are working to get people to do that kind of low dollar funding, and it's becoming a more and more important part of our fundraising. Now, in the past, I think the party was, when I ran for chair, I heard it all the time, the only events that you have are so expensive, I can never go. And so we are trying in every way possible to say, hey, some events you don't have to pay anything, But others, we want to make low dollar, or if you're part of this regular low dollar giving, you get to go because you're part of that.
Right.
So we're doing everything we can. Now, the problem is not everyone and not every party is Bernie Sanders. So it's not leading to millions of dollars.
Right.
But we actually are getting some really good support out of low dollar repeated online fundraising, and we're going to keep doing that. And with the current energy right now, I think that'll grow even more. So that's one of the things we're working very hard to do.
Very good. I think we had a question submitted by Guido, and he was saying that I voted for Bernie Sanders in the primary. I was disappointed by the outcome, but I moved forward and I voted for Secretary Clinton.
Right.
I know that many of my peers did not do the same. So how will the Ohio Democratic Party
Right.
specifically, work to earn the support of these Sanders progressives?
Yeah. So the first thing, I appreciate his question, and you and I rode on the bus to the convention together, and I talked to a lot of the most spirited Bernie Sanders supporters who are friends of mine, and we talked a lot about this. And one of the saddest parts of the election in the fall was Bernie Sanders came back to Ohio. He was actually really a good soldier. He came back to Ohio.
Yeah.
He went to the same college campuses that he'd been to 6 months before, and there were like 400 people compared to 5,000 6 months before. So clearly this is a concern. And I think we have to, one, and the party did do this, make sure that we understand that the issues he brought up in the authentic way that he campaigned for them really impacted people, really got people excited. Whether it's, health care, whether it's college debt, whether it's getting rid of Citizens United.
Right.
And we have to make sure that those issues, and he talked about trade in a way that I think was very clear. And if we don't learn, whether it's Bernie Sanders saying those words or our candidates locally and our statewide 18, we have to be as clear on those issues as he was, and a little bolder than maybe Democrats have been in the past. And I think we have to learn from that. And we also have to, and I think this is something that a lot of Sanders supporters say, we have to make sure that we are really seen as an open party. That as we go into 18 and we have primaries, that it's not going to look as if the party is playing a role to favor anybody. That we welcome, as we talked about, hey, if you want to run for office, come to the ODP, we want to train you. We're not playing favorites. You come, you want to run, we want to help you run. One of the things I was most proud of was we had a number of folks, and by the way, I worked very hard as a chair last year to be neutral between Clinton and Sanders. We had Sanders meetups at the ODP headquarters. We only had one at our dinner when we insisted that we would have both or neither. So I tried to be fair, and I think for the most part, I think Bernie Sanders people thought I was fair. At least that's what I've been told. But in the fall, I was excited that a number of Sanders supporters actually were candidates for Congress, for state rep, and I thought that was hopefully a great sign that we were actually, that it wasn't a separate, but all of a sudden we were all cheering for the same people, wherever they'd been. But let me just say one thing in closing. This is why this is so important. Every day that we relive that primary, if we keep fighting about it, Trump wins. What Trump is doing to our country right now is so horrific. I mean, today it's sanctuary cities. Yesterday, and he's going to do some new voter fraud study, which is a preview to voter suppression. If we spend any time, reliving that primary and fighting amongst each other and not figuring out how do we bridge those differences and actually take on this huge threat of Donald Trump to the essence of our country, he's winning. And so that's why I think it's really important to unite. It's really important to get on one page, and it's really important for all of us, and then a whole lot of other people to stand up and get in the way of all the terrible things Trump's trying to do.
Okay, and then I think we're going to touch on another point kind of related to this.
Okay.
Maybe about the progressive wing and the, whatever people will say, like the more central wing.
Right.
So in your mind, what would the difference be between like a progressive Democrat and a more traditional Democrat, and which would you consider yourself to be?
So honestly, my number one response when you hear a question like that is I think that we make a mistake when we have just two buckets. I think there's a spectrum on economics, there's a spectrum on social issues. I think of myself as progressive. I don't know where that falls in. I've been that for a long time. But I actually think we're now at a point where you also are going to start winning over by being just basically loyal to democracy. Because I think
Right.
what Donald Trump is doing, whether you're somehow defined as a moderate or a liberal or somewhere in between, or now even someone who's a true moderate Republican, at some point the unifying theme in the next couple of years should be what Donald Trump is doing is an outright assault on most of the most fundamental principles of our democracy. Transparency, raw corruption, national sovereignty, fair elections, you name it. And so my hope is we can not get caught up in a couple buckets, but actually broaden it, that anyone who actually cares about sort of some of the most essential components of what our country's always been, at some point in the next 2 years should be rallying to stop what Donald Trump's doing. So I think there's a spectrum. I think that in the end of the day, our goal as Democrats is to unite all sides of that spectrum. I do think, by the way, to get to some of the early questions, I think the best unification point is going to be around economics, is going to be around lifting people, opportunity for all people. I think wherever you are on that spectrum, I think if we as the Democrats can be the ones that say, you may think this or this or this or this, but we're the ones that are fighting for sort of the average Ohioan to do better economically. We understand that it's been 30 years of flat wages. We understand that Ohio has not recovered from the recession the way other states have. If wherever you are on that spectrum, we're the ones who people see are fighting economically to lift people and to give real opportunity, I think then that's how we start winning elections. And back to one of the early questions, it was our failure to do that at the end of that election that cost us a lot of votes and in the end cost us the state.
Right. Well, that was good notes there. We're going to take another really quick break, and please keep submitting those questions and stay tuned, and we will see you in a minute.
I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. Hey, yo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. I'ma get a scholarship to King's College. I probably shouldn't brag, but dag, I amaze and astonish. The problem is I got a lot of brains, but no polish. I gotta holler just to be heard with every word. I drop knowledge. I'm a diamond in the rough, a shining piece of coal, trying to reach my goal. My power of speech, unimpeachable. Only 19, but my mind is older. These New York City streets get colder. I shoulder every burden, every disadvantage I've learned to manage. I don't have a gun to brandish. I walk these streets famished. The plan is to fan this spark into a flame. But damn, it's getting dark, so let me spell out the name. I am the A-L-E-X-A-N-D-E-R. We are meant to be a colony that runs independently. Meanwhile, Britain keeps shitting on us endlessly. Essentially, they tax us relentlessly. Then King George turns around, runs a spending spree. He ain't never gonna set his descendants free. So there will be a revolution in this century. Enter me.
He says in parentheses.
Don't be shocked when your history book mentions me. I will lay down my life if it sets us free. Eventually, you'll see my ascendancy. And I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. Hey, yo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. Hey, yo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. It's time to take a shot.
I dream of life without a monarchy. The unrest in France will lead to anarchy. Anarchy, how you say? Or anarchy. When I fight, I make the other side panicky with my shot.
Yo, I'm a tailor's apprentice, and I got y'all knuckleheads and local parentes. I'm joining a rebellion, cause I know it's my chance to socially advance. Instead of sewing some pants, I'm gonna take a shot.
But we'll never be truly free until those in bondage.
So we're going to start with some live ones. But before we get to that one, I want to know, what's your biggest pet peeve with Ohio politics?
So this is going to sound like a really wonky answer, but it's gerrymandering. It truly is the fact that, when I ran for office at the local level, I actually had to earn my election. I had to win. I had to go out and make my case. And the fact that the Republicans have gerrymandered the state, so literally almost none of them have to actually win an election. The results of almost every legislative election in our state, the results of almost every congressional election, we all right now can predict it. We know it's going to be for the next 4 or 6 years. That has such horrible impact on so many parts of our democracy. It makes things more partisan. It makes politicians totally non-accountable. It makes it harder for young people to. You talk about feeling like you can't get into politics. Well, no young Democrats can get in half the state because the districts make it impossible for them to win. So it cuts off the next generation from entering politics. You know, the egregious gerrymandering. I mean, more than half of Ohio, a greater percentage of Ohioans in 12 voted for a Democrat for Congress. Yet the Democratic makeup from Ohio is 12-4 Republican Democrat. I mean, it's just a horrible system. And as I say all the time, you know, if Vladimir Putin saw this system, he'd say, "Wow, what a great way to make sure that the voters don't matter." And we have it in Ohio, and it's almost like it's forgotten. So, two things: it's more than a pet peeve. It has to be gotten away with. And my hope is that in the next year or two, we can do a districting reform initiative in Ohio. We did it for State House. We have to do it for Congress, and my hope is we can do it in the next couple of years.
Okay. So a live question is, will the Ohio Democratic Party agree not to endorse any statewide elections since there will be no incumbents in 2018?
So let me say that. First of all, the executive committee is 148 to 50 people, and it's a democratic process. I will say, I think my sense is there are a lot of people running. And I would, without predicting exactly what the committee would do, my guess is there would be a lot of hesitation to weighing in and not allowing a primary to play itself out. I mean, right now, there are a lot of really interesting people who are talking about running. I think they all can make a strong case, and generally my attitude is great. Let them make that strong case, and may the best man or woman win. So that's my attitude about it. And there is a process. If people want to seek the endorsement, they can try and seek it. What I've set up though is a different approach, which is I've set up a committee that's going to interview all these candidates and really have a conversation about what it's going to take to win and how we're going to start winning back voters. A lot of the questions we've talked about today, but it's not an endorsement committee. It's not about going towards endorsement. It's about having a good conversation, just like we're having with all these candidates. But my guess is, my sense is that. I don't speak for the committee, but my sense is it'd be very difficult for someone to get an endorsement when I think you're going to have a number of candidates who all have real good strengths. And this is the cycle where I think you just say, let the best candidate win. Do you think maybe that structure might be a little more difficult for like a grassroots newcomer or perhaps a young person who hasn't yet had the committee? The thing I think it's the best opportunity. I actually think that. I like it. The person who's connected will know all the people to talk to already. Right. This is a chance for someone to walk in there and impress people and come in and say, here's my plan to change Ohio. Here's my plan to win an election. And so if you had someone running for governor or secretary of state who maybe people hadn't heard of, this gives them opportunity to, frankly, impress a whole lot of people they otherwise might not get meetings with. Might not have known. So my goal here is to be fair to every candidate. We have a lot of, I get calls every day. I may run for this, I may run for that, and I say, hey, welcome. The other thing I want to do, and frankly, we could work together on this, as we have these candidates out there, I want to provide forums, social media and live, where these candidates can debate and talk about their visions for the state. So I think, if we have a crowded primary, sometimes that can lead to some negativity, but I also think it can lead to a lot of enthusiasm around the process. And my hope is if that's what we have, that we can actually, over the course of 2017, think through a lot of creative ways to make the most of all those ideas in the primary. So we have another really good Facebook Live question, kind of the counter to the open forum. Okay. This is from Amalia, who says, will ODP help fund a full-page ad in the Columbus Dispatch to shine a light on Rep. Tiberi refusing to hold a town hall to hear from constituents? Okay. That's a great question. I cannot commit to a Dispatch ad, but we agree with the question. Pat Tiberi is literally the guy in the country who's in charge of the replace part of their horrible idea to repeal and replace. And I think if it's not a page ad, the dispatch, it's thousands of people standing outside his office.
Right.
It is more noise than this person has ever heard saying, you have the health care of the entire country in your hands. You should listen to the citizens. And I know we have some people on our end gathering petitions on this as well. So I completely agree. If a donor, by the way, comes to me and says, we can help pay for that full page ad, then I'll consider that. But I think that of all the people in Ohio right now that should be hearing from citizens and ultimately should listen to citizens, it's right here in Columbus, Pat Tiberi, and we are demanding the same kind of thing. He should have a public hearing. He should have many of them. He should listen to all of his citizens, not just in his district, but around the state. And I'd love to work with anyone who's out there trying to do this to make that happen.
Great.
a
Another
great
great
question.
live question. What should Dems in deep red country do? John in Delaware. I'm sure, with this past election, maybe there's some...
So
It's tough. Yeah.
Actually, Delaware, just to be clear, Delaware lost by less in 16 than they did in 12.
Okay.
So Delaware and Warren County, some of the biggest Republican counties, actually, to their credit, they were very organized. They really worked hard, and I think they are actually an example that what you need to do in counties, even if it's red, is go talk to citizens. And Delaware and Warren were very active, and by doing that, you saw that their margin of loss, these are some of the counties that the Republicans do the best in, our margin of loss in Delaware and Warren was lower than it was in 12, which is a good direction.
John did well.
Yeah. And what we need to do, though, is we need to do more of that. So two things. One is, John and others, make sure that we hear from you about the issues and the message that you think it takes to win Delaware. That's why we're doing these kitchen table conversations. We need to hear from you what you think our message should be in those areas, not to just win over progressive Democrats, because they're progressive Democrats in Delaware, but how do we get to the swing voters, moderate Republicans, moderate Democrats in places like Delaware, so we reduce the loss margin. And then secondly, I think bottom line is, as we build towards 18, even in counties that know we're going to lose, we have to still be knocking on doors, and we have to be knocking on doors not just of people we know are going to vote for us, but the swing voters. The voters, again, there are thousands and thousands of voters who voted for Obama and they voted for Trump.
Right.
If we don't knock on their door, they're not going to vote for us. So we have to, in places like Delaware and Union County and you name it, Southern Ohio, we have to engage people in every single county. And so the other thing I tell John is, and they're doing this in Delaware, that's why they did pretty well in that election compared to other counties, is we need to have the most strong local grassroots sort of neighbor by neighbor, neighborhood team leader organization possible, so we have the ability to go talk to people at their front door.
So this is actually pretty closely related to this. It's more about building a broader base of a coalition for progressive-leaning folks.
Right.
So Jim on Twitter asked, will you support non-traditional or nonpartisan groups that are springing up statewide to protest this new administration?
Absolutely. We want to partner. First of all, we want to know who everybody is. And one of the things that I don't want to ever have anyone sense that it's sort of the party. We don't think we have to do. We do a lot,
right.
But we love that all these groups are forming. And one of the things we have created, I mentioned before, to the extent we can be helpful, we want to be helpful. To the extent people want to do their own thing, that's okay too. But one thing that we'd like to do over time is figure out how the message of all these groups, we talked about message in the very beginning, how can that message be the strongest? How can it be very consistent? How can we be most effective, let's say, in taking on Tiberi? And to the extent we can be supportive in that way, and we help people think through a certain week, maybe all these groups will do better if we all are talking about the same issue. If we're all calling Rob Portman in 1 week.
Right.
And instead of one group calling this group and one group calling someone else. So one thing we are creating, and if you go on our website, you'll see it, we call our effort to help all this our truth team. Every single congressional district, we have a truth team that we're forming. And it's doing exactly the kind of things that these groups are doing. It's calling. It's showing up. A couple weeks ago, a great group of people showed up in the 2nd District at Brad Winstrup, the congressman's monthly coffee. And they were there to tell him how horrified they were by the idea that they get rid of the Affordable Care Act. He didn't know what to do. He's not engaged with people before. It ended up on Rachel Maddow. They were so effective at getting their message across. We want to help make that happen again and again. And so what I'd ask you to do, if you want to have the connection back to us, so we're working together, go to our website, look for the Truth Team, sign up for it, and we want to just help. we want to just help coordinate as best we can. We don't want to be the front door messenger, though. We think that these groups, many times, just like the March in Washington, the best messengers are the people themselves.
Right.
But if we can help coordinate, organize, and help make sure that we're doing it in the most effective way possible message-wise, we want to help there to the extent people want to partner with us. So it's been wonderful to see all that energy.
Very good. So as we're kind of nearing our end here, we're going to take another live question from Wendy in Chagrin Falls, who asked, what is your position on nonpartisan primaries to open up the candidate pool?
You know, honestly, mine was not a primary. I'm thinking back to my own election. My first race was a nonpartisan council race. Now, Democrats endorsed. So, you know, I don't spend a lot of time thinking through all these different permutations of how we can do this. You know, to the extent there's some communities that have that works fine. Actually, I won a mayor's race in a nonpartisan primary. So, you know, honestly, I don't think, I'm not here to weigh in on different communities and how they do it. You know, Cincinnati has a nonpartisan primary for mayor. It leads to more people running. That works well for Cincinnati. Obviously, in the state, we have something different. So I can't say I have a super strong opinion. I think it maybe depends on the community, the jurisdiction. And for the most part, the nonpartisan primary is working fine in Cincinnati. If other communities do that, that's great. I'm not trying to weigh in on each one.
There you go. Well, one question that we had from Frank in Medina was, what keeps you up at night? Like, what do you think about? You know, what makes you tick?
Okay. A couple answers to that. First, I have an 8-week-old son. He keeps me up at night.
Yeah.
Every 3 hours, he
Yeah.
keeps me up at night, and my wife up. So, in all seriousness, that 8-week-old son and my older son, who's 2.5, honestly, not to end on a downer, but what keeps me up at night right now is that Donald Trump's our president, and seriously, in the last couple weeks, I mean, starting with you know, the alternative facts that we heard about on Saturday, the attack on voters that we heard started tonight, this morning. The worry that I have about nothing being done on climate change for years, the prospect of Supreme Court nominees, 4 or 5 of them in the coming years, and then I look at my 2 little kids, and if we don't stop these things, that our young people will live with all this for decades, that keeps me up at night. And I will say one thing in that, and so what do I do to feel better about that? I know one thing. If we can stop some of the worst things by doing all the work we just talked about, those new grassroots groups, our work, and every time there's one that's close, that power of the people in the grassroots stop things, we are helping our next generation. The second thing is, if we in the end harness all that energy to succeed in 2018, the difference in Donald Trump being president for 4 years and 8 years is enormous in terms of the damage he's done. If he's president for 8 years, that's 4 or 5 Supreme Court justices versus just 1. That's 8 years of no progress on climate change versus only 4 years. Right. And so one of the responsibilities we have in Ohio is to, by doing very well in 2018, send a signal to everyone, the world, to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and everyone else, that this guy is going to be a 4-year president, and we're going to move on quick from this guy. And so at least if we do that, we really alleviate the worst damage he could do. So he keeps me up at night right now. But I keep inspired by the idea that we in Ohio, along with a few other states, if we go blue in 2018, and by the way, in a history, we generally have won when they're in the White House. We never have won when we're in the White House, but 2018 is the kind of year where in the past we've won. If we can send a signal in 2018 and go blue and win governor's races, re-elect Sherrod Brown, then we can actually send a signal that lets us move on to 20 pretty quickly and limit some of the worst things Donald Trump's going to do.
So I guess maybe we'll close on a question about 18. This is one that was submitted earlier. Is what type of gubernatorial candidate would the Dems need? What do you think they need to win back the governorship in 20?
I think the most important, well, first of all, the state of Ohio is going in a terrible direction. Economically, we are literally in our 47 out of 48 months trailing the national recovery. Wages have been flat for 30 years. Our schools are falling apart because of this for-profit disaster experiment with online and charter schools. And we're the number one state in the country on the opioid crisis. We have more overdose deaths than any other state. We have to be the change. And so the candidate I want is the one who can best make the case that Ohio, and it's not that hard a case to make, by the way, if you have the right candidate.
Sure.
Ohio is heading in a terrible direction in any way you can measure it, and especially on the economic message, and that we need a dramatic change of direction, someone who's going to reinvest in schools and stop taking money from local governments and stop giving out tax breaks at the high end and have a surge in treatment so we stop having these horrible heroin and other addiction epidemics. And the candidate who can best make that case that we're the change against, after decades of terrible Republican rule, most recently John Kasich, I think we win the election. And so we need someone who can really bring that message. And the good news is, right now, we have a number of candidates who I think can do that.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us, David. Thank you, viewers, for joining us. We hope that we got to answer your questions. And
Great.
there we go.
Thank you very much. It's great to be back with you guys.
Yeah,
Thanks
it
for
was
everything
great
you
to
guys
have
do.
you.
And
Thank you.
If you heard anything here that you want to get involved with, come either go to our Facebook page or go to our website. Truth Team, the training on February 18th for candidates. If you want to run for office, let us know. We are here to work with everyone who's watching to make sure we stop some really bad things in the near future and win big at 18. Thanks so much.
Thanks.